The unprecedented pace of disruption and uncertainty makes leadership more relevant today than ever before. It is not position or power, but your leadership skills that help you to think in unique, creative ways. When faced with a crisis, a leader is forced to think and make critical decisions. A leader who empowers a team and gives employees accountability increases the effectiveness of an organization. John Maxwell says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Warren Bennis says leadership is the capacity to turn vision into reality. And Bill Gates says, as we look ahead into the next century, leaders will be those who empower others. Today, I have the honor of welcoming Dr. Mike Clayton. Dr. Mike Clayton is the founder of onlinepmcourses.com and runs one of the premier YouTube channels for project managers. Mike is one of the most successful and in-demand project management trainers in the UK. He's a prolific blogger and the author of 14 best-selling books, including 5 about project management. Mike was a successful project leader as a consulting senior manager with the London office of Deloitte. There, he led major projects for the UK government, FTSE 100 businesses, and US multinationals. Now, Mike specializes in training in personal effectiveness for professionals, leaders, and managers. He applies his experience and ideas to the arenas of productivity, leadership, presentation, project management, personal and organizational change, and the science of influence and decision-making. In January 2020, Mike launched the new YouTube channel, Management Courses, to provide comprehensive, structured management training in video format, entirely free through YouTube. He lives in an English market town in Hampshire with his family. Welcome, Dr. Mike, to this talk.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
I'd like to start by asking you, what do you think are 3 traits that a project manager or a leader should have to thrive in a disruptive economy?
Yeah, I think the first of them I would describe as agility, and I'm not using that in the technical project management sense. I'm not thinking about agile project management, but I think for me, it's about the kind of flexibility to change yourself, your behavior, your thinking throughout your career. I think that our profession is changing rapidly, and our profession is also one of dealing with and making change happen. So we've got to be able to cope with that change better than anyone else. And that means that the agility to flex our ways of working. So that'd be my first. And I think picking up on that theme, my second would be to be tech savvy, really comfortable in a high technology environment. And I don't mean we have to be technologists. That would do no harm. But we have to be able to talk to all the different technologists in all the different disciplines. And we have to be comfortable making our approaches, our methodologies more susceptible to technical innovation, as well as implementing technology as part of the project. The third one that I think I'd like to focus on, it's been said many times that project management is all about communication. It's a people skill, not a technical skill. And I think that's become a commonplace, and it would be a little cliched for me to say that. Where I think this is going now is that I think as project managers, the third thing I'd say we have to have is a cultural multi-sensitivity. We have to be sensitive to all the cultures around the world, all the cultures within our own region and area. We have to be able to work with people of all different sorts. And For many people, what that means is multicultural projects that span the globe. But for other people, it means a microcosm of the different cultures, the different ways of thinking, all sitting within one office, in one place. And if we are not able to adapt ourselves to those different cultures, then we're not going to get the best out of the teams that we're leading. And therefore, our projects are not going to, well, we're certainly not going to optimize our projects. Potentially, they're not going to succeed because our projects are dependent upon the people that are working on them. So to summarize, we need to be flexible, we need to be comfortable with technology, and we need to be able to work with people of all different sorts.
Yeah, three interesting points you brought out there: agility, tech savviness, and being culturally sensitive. Now we come to managing a crisis. How does a leader respond in times of a crisis? And what are some effective steps that he or she takes?
Yeah. The first has to be communication. In the absence of good communication, people will spread gossip and rumors, which will be destructive. So you have to be candid and clear about what you know and also what you don't know. It's okay, I think, for a leader to say, listen, this is what we don't know. At least that's putting a fact out there that we don't know it, to replace the potential fake fact that people will make up. And we need to communicate frequently as well. Secondly, I think we have to be optimistic, and I'm not talking about that kind of glass half full optimism that says everything's going to be fine no matter how bad it is. For me, optimism is about realism, a realistic assessment of what's going on, a recognition of what the opportunities are to put things right, and the kind of resilience that says that I will just keep on working, I will keep on deploying the resources I have, the expertise, the skills, the talent at my disposal to make things happen. And with that, I think I would add, the best word I can come up with is steadiness. You have to be calm and confident and efficient in the way you work. You have to be the kind of anchor for people who feel that they're being thrown around by the storm. So if you think about a ship at sea, the only thing that's really going to steady that ship is a good, solid anchor. And finally, thinking about those people, I would say you need compassion. You need to be able to understand the challenges people are facing, both emotionally and technically, and be able and willing to provide them the support they need to cope in that challenging environment.
Coming to taking care of a team, a leader and his team, how does a leader motivate and connect to your team? And what support can he or she offer in times of crisis?
I think in times of crisis, what people crave above all else is a little bit of routine. And I think in the current crisis, the global kind of coronavirus crisis, I think where we've seen organizations, whether they be project organizations or operational organizations, where we've seen them thrive, I think a lot of that has been about leaders creating a new normal, building back as much routine as they can into people's daily work lives, whether that's adapting the routine that they were used to before things changed, or whether it's finding new routines. Because humans, we need that kind of certainty that we know what's going to happen next in order to be comfortable enough to innovate. And in times of crisis, we need to be able to innovate. So we need that kind of, again, it's back to that metaphor of an anchor. We need that kind of solid kind of root to the ground that will allow us to do that. And then to keep the team motivated, we then need to challenge them to provide challenges that they can rise to, that are fitted to their skills, to their abilities, and to their ambitions. Don't be frightened to give people a huge challenge, as long as you give them the resources and the support they need to feel that they can do their best work without fear of the consequences of not achieving it. And I always, when I think about crisis, there's some of your readers, some of your listeners and viewers may have seen a film called Apollo 13 about the Apollo mission. And there's a wonderful scene where the technical experts are challenged to find a way with all of the stuff lying around the space capsule to fix one fitting to match it up to another very different fitting. And they're told in no uncertain terms that lives depend on what they do, but they're told to go away and just be as creative as they can and to just keep working the problem until they fix it. And that kind of challenge is important. And then to bring the themes of routine and challenge together, I think the third thing I would pick out is, no matter how difficult the times, you need to be constantly aware of the need to develop your people, to give them those opportunities that will help them feel like they are growing and progressing as people, as professionals, and therefore in their career. That we look to our leaders to not only keep us going, but to give us a direction that we feel we can commit to. And in the world of work, I think that career direction, and therefore that sense of I'm developing, I'm growing, is very important.
You talked about challenges, and my next question is, if you look at your career, what is one big challenge that you have faced?
Yeah,
as a project
this
manager?
is a challenge I've talked about before in other contexts, and I think it's an important one to air in terms of leadership, because possibly for all the successes and all the kind of technical challenges I faced, the biggest challenge to me, and the one that really changed me the most, was on a project where I was leading a large part of the project, and I was working extremely hard. My team were working extremely hard. I was getting into work earlier every day to try to be there and have some time before my teams would turn up and start demanding some of my time. I was frequently ordering food at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night for 50, 60, 70, 80 people. It was a tough time. And there came a point, and we don't really need to go into the details of how it came about, where I was under such stress that I pretty much snapped. I just couldn't cope with that stress. And it's, as project managers, project leaders, we like to think of ourselves as able to do anything. We have this kind of superhero complex. Give me a challenge and I will take it on. Give me a bigger challenge and I'll relish it. There comes a point where you're under so much pressure, you're looking after everyone else, you're not looking after yourself. And if we remember back to the time when people routinely got on airplanes and flew around the world for work, the first thing that they would tell you is, if there is a problem, put on your face mask before you help the person next to you. And I think we've got to remember that as project managers, that if we are faced by emotional and psychological challenges, if we are not taking care of ourselves, we need to be then we cannot take care of our teams. We cannot take care of our clients and our stakeholders. So the biggest challenge for me was dealing with personal stress and finding that resilience. And it wasn't, we're not talking about a disaster here. I was useless for about 24 hours, but I slept it off. I walked it off, and everything was fine. But it was close to not being fine, I would say. So that was my biggest challenge.
Today, we are speaking over Zoom. There's Skype meetings, Google Meets, WhatsApp, all these tools out there. And we are moving from a localized setting to a virtual setting. So how do you lead effectively in a virtual workplace?
Yeah. I've presented a seminar on this, a webinar on this a while ago. And in researching it, I came to the conclusion that being virtual doesn't change anything. It doesn't change the dials you need to tweak on your leadership, on your management, on your support for your team. It just changes the relative settings and turns quite a lot of them up you need to turn quite a lot of them up. And I think the first one is trust. As leaders, many of us struggle with the idea of trusting our team members. And of course, it's easy to trust someone who's sitting next to you and you can kind of keep an eye on them and, you know, turn and see what they're up to. The more distant they are, the harder it is to trust them, which is one of the reasons I think why multinational teams have struggled, because as a team leader, I've got the double problem of trusting someone who speaks in a different way to me, thinks in a different way to me, has different value sets around work to me because they come from a country the other side of the world. Plus, I can't say hello to them every morning and chat with them about what they're doing. So it's much harder. So I think you need, firstly, to develop trust as a deliberate leadership style. You have to grant autonomy and start with the working assumption that I can trust you until you prove me wrong, rather than our default assumption for most of us, which is I can't trust you until you prove that I can. So start with that, because, you know, the reality of the world is, yes, there are some people out there that you can't trust, and some people you can't trust in a big way who will try to con you and think. But most people you meet, if you think about it, we notice the people you can't trust because they are the exceptions rather than the default position for humanity. So trust as a leadership style. And then when granting responsibility, I think you need to communicate a clear outcome-based set of requirements rather than tell people how to do things and the detail of what to do. Just say, this is what I need to happen. And if you need advice, if you need guidance, if you need specifications, then come to me. But if you can make that happen, then that's the result I want. And I think also the thing that tends to go badly wrong virtually is the day-to-day kind of developmental feedback-based conversations, which say, you know, I've seen you doing this and I think it's fabulous. And what I particularly liked about this piece of work, it's much harder to do that remotely. So we need to prioritize it. But I think that does give us a huge opportunity. My wife is as a professional, is a coach. She coaches people, and for many years she's coached people in person, sitting face to face with them across a small table in a comfortable setting. And she has taken her coaching online. And I remember when I did my coaching training, I was taught that what coaching is fundamentally about is asking really good questions and listening carefully to the answer. And I think that, and my wife's experience is that, and I've done some coaching online as well over the last few months, is that actually coaching works really well. It's a really good tool to apply to this kind of virtual Zoom, Skype, Teams environment. So as a leader, really pump up the amount of effort you put into coaching your team members, sitting and listening to them, asking them questions that will make them think, and then giving them the time to think and to express their ideas and listen to them. And you don't have to be in the same room as someone to do that. And so it's the perfect solution.
Excellent points. Trust, active listening, and deliberately thinking about the outcome, clear outcome.
Yeah.
Now, at the beginning of this year, many companies were taken aback when this COVID-19 pandemic struck. So how do you actually preempt such a risk and factor it into your risk management plan?
Okay, well, I think the first point I would make is that this COVID thing was no black swan. What I mean by that is I'm referring here to Nassim Nicholas Taleb's concept of a black swan, an event that you can't predict because you didn't have the knowledge. The simple fact is people did predict this event. And I think this is what we would strictly call an aleatory risk. It's a known unknown. In a sense, we knew that anyone could have told you that at some point there would be another global pandemic. It was inevitable. What nobody could tell you was when it was going to start, what the detailed nature of it was, what kind of virus it was going to be, the route it would take around the world, which countries would be badly hit. But anyone who understood these things could have told you that sometime in the 21st century, probably in the early 21st century, Bill Gates actually said in the early 2020s, and he said it was going to be a coronavirus, you know, so we knew this was going to happen. So I think that your question splits into two. The first half is, how do we anticipate this kind of event, which we know is going to happen, we just don't know when and how bad and where. And the second is actually, how do we prepare ourselves for genuine black swan events? So for this kind of thing where you know something big could happen, but realistically it doesn't make sense to prepare your project for this. It makes sense for governments to prepare for it. You know, every government from now on should do what the East Asian governments who had to deal with what was it? It was SARS, wasn't it? I think, or yeah, they had vast stocks of protective equipment. They had plans for locking down quickly, and by and large, a lot of those did very well in the start of it. As a business, and therefore, if you're running a major project, you are a small business, you need to have crisis management plans. Not that say, oh, if we get a coronavirus and the business needs to send everyone home, we will do this, because that's too specific. You can't predict everything. But what you can do is to say, you know, the first thing we will do when there is a crisis is we will get the following people together, off-site if need be, virtually if need be, to look at our priorities. And you build a crisis plan around that kind of flexibility that says, here are the people that need to be involved in decision making. These are the resources they need to be able to call upon. And now we know more about this particular kind of crisis. The temptation will be to design a crisis plan around the crisis we've just had. Whereas actually we need to design a crisis plan that is flexible enough for the different crisis we're going to have next time, whenever that is. And that brings us to the whole thing of genuine black swans, things that could happen that we just have no knowledge of. And I think the only thing we can do about black swans is it's the process of discovery, of constant research. For project managers, you know, we can't be spending all our time researching things that we don't know about. That's not realistic. But what we can do is we can constantly be putting our head above the wall and looking out. I like the metaphor of a meerkat. And what meerkats do is they spend their time foraging around on the ground, looking down. But every now and then, one of them will get up on its hind legs and it will stand as tall as it can, and it will look out as far as the horizon and look into the sky to see if there are any predatory birds or predators on the horizon. If there aren't, it will get back down, and everyone will sense that it's doing that and they'll feel comfortable. But if it sees something, it will make a noise and they will all scurry. And we've got to be doing that as project managers. We've got to be kind of getting up on our hind legs and looking at the horizon every now and then. And I think there are two disciplines to help us do that. The first is to be broad-based in our gathering of knowledge. We've got to be reading trade journals, project management websites, good quality news sources. And your readers and listeners will know there is a difference in their country between the rubbish news that they might enjoy reading and the good quality, reliable news sources. And I know there are some jurisdictions, some countries where there are genuinely no really good quality news sources because of the politics of the country. But most of us are fortunate enough to have those. So we need, as project managers, to be aware of what's going on in the world and what's going on in our part of the world. We need to be aware of what's going on in our organizations, in our industries, and in the technologies that we're implementing. And then secondly, we need to take time out. And I've always, since the mid-1990s, when I used to do this actively on my projects, I've always talked about the idea of the next bend and of taking half an hour to an hour out of every week to sit quietly, away from our teams, away from our projects, away from our families. I used to go to a coffee shop near my project. Wherever I was, I'd find a local coffee shop, and I would put in my diary meeting room 7. And one day, one person said to me, "Mike, I came looking for you, and there is no meeting room 7 in this building." And I said, "Yeah, that's because it's the coffee shop next door." And I would disappear, and all I would take would be a notebook and a pencil, and I would think about, what are we missing? What are we not thinking about? And you know what? I would say 2 times out of 3, I would sit there and I would, make some notes about things we should do, but it wasn't very important, and there was nothing significant. But every now and then I would come up with something, and I would think, we need to be thinking about this. And I would come back to the project with some new energy and some new direction for some of my team members. And on 1 or 2 occasions, those would create new work streams for the project, which would have a significant impact on the success of the project. As project managers, you need to be gathering information, and then you need to allow yourself the time for all those ideas that are in your head, but getting drowned out by the noise of what's going on today. You need to calm that noise and allow those ideas to come to the surface. And that's the best you can do as a project manager, to spot the trends which might turn into sudden changes. And I think, I remember reading about what was going on in China very early in the year, and thinking, I wonder if this is going to be a Spanish flu style incident, or whether it's going to be a MERS style incident, which is just going to be a local thing. If I'd have been active project manager, I hope I would have had the sense to get my team together and say, just in case this turns out to be a big thing, let's think about how we shut down the project in an orderly way, how we continue the project remotely. Well, I'm not saying I would have thought of that, but that would have given me the best chance to, if I had done.
What do you see as a future for project managers?
It might sound odd at this time when so many people are worried about their personal futures and the futures of their families, and in fact, the health of their families. But moving past this, and as a world, we will at some point move past it. It might be 6 months, it might be 6 years. I see the future for project managers as very bright, particularly for project managers who are serious about their profession and who take it seriously, and they don't want to make shortcuts to get to the top quickly. They want to do it right. I think the demand for good quality project managers will outstrip the supply. I think there is so much going on in the world, so many big organizations, whether they be governmental organizations or private sector, commercial organizations. There are so many organizations that have big plans and will have big plans and will need to make big changes, that the demand for good project managers will be huge. And therefore, I think the challenge for us as project managers is to develop. It's back to this idea of agility. We've got to keep on learning and developing ourselves so that we can be that excellent project manager that gets the good projects. So that the people who are looking for a quick win and a shortcut to making a buck out of project management, they get pushed onto the projects that don't matter so much, that don't have the huge impact if they fail. The good project managers should be able to pick our projects and make really valuable change for our customers, our clients, our stakeholders, and for the world.
We come to the final question now. Do you have any words of advice for youngsters or the millennials who would like to take up a career in project management or leadership?
Yeah. I think firstly, I'd say to them, I think it's a good choice. I think project management is a good way into a long and fulfilling career. Beyond pure project management, there are plenty of roles that you can develop out of project management that can keep you engaged for a whole lifetime, be they organizational leadership. I think project management these days is a route through to strategic thinking and to the C-suite. I think there are lots of other career routes that start with project management. I started as a project manager. Now I think of myself as an author and a trainer and a YouTuber. I don't actively manage projects. So you can go in many directions: consulting, PMOs, corporate leadership. You could even become a speaker and an author out of it. So I think firstly, I'd say it's a good choice, and a fulfilling opportunity. If you want to do well, I think what I would say is do not rush the process of learning the craft of project management. I know there are people out there who will put whatever they think they need to on their PMP application to get that kind of, to qualify to take the exam, but they know really and truly they don't have the experience yet. Take your time, get the experience, learn the craft, study lots of different aspects of project management, study lots of different aspects of management, of leadership, of personal effectiveness. Get good at communicating, at influencing, at negotiating, understand technologies, understand companies, understand corporate strategy. Do the whole lot. Get really good at, so that managing a good quality project becomes automatic to you. Not that you're not thinking, but that you know what a Gantt chart is. You can create a Gantt chart. You can supervise people well, because actually what will make you a really good project manager and a project manager that people will see as a leader and will promote into genuine leadership roles. And that's focusing on people. You know, going back to the difference between those high quality project managers and those people who are rushing, the high quality project managers will be able to do the project management stuff, and they will be able to focus on leading people, on guiding them, relating to them, influencing them, negotiating with them. The project managers who just rush will be struggling just to do basic project management and won't have time for people. They won't be good at people. They won't value their people. And I expect everyone that in your network, the same as me, will have experiences of poor project managers and poor leaders who just were frankly abusive to some of the people in their care. I will put my hand up and say there were probably times early on in my career where I was not a good manager and a good leader. I didn't treat people the way that I would have wanted them to treat me. But I did know early on who the good leaders were, who the good project managers were, and who the bad ones were. And I knew who I wanted to model myself on. Be the person that you would want to have lead you.
Dr. Mike, it was a pleasure listening to you offer your insights on all those questions that I posed to you. And I'm sure those listening to this video will also benefit a lot. Thank you so much.
I hope so. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.